Does this film do the video game justice? Let's find out. Hello Fanatics! Hello Fanatics, I'm Dylan Phillips, and this is the Film Fanatic Review bringing you Rampage, starring Dwayne Johnson, Naomie Harris, and Malene Akerman. First, we'll tell you what the movie is about, and our initial thoughts. Then we'll move on to our spoiler-free likes and dislikes. We'll finish up with some spoiler-heavy thoughts on this film, and our final word. Rampage follows the story of a primatologist and a geneticist who team up to stop 3 different animals that become infected with a dangerous pathogen from destroying Chicago. Overall, this was an entertaining, albeit generic, summer blockbuster. It definitely has its faults, but it's exactly what you expect. For what I liked about this film, let's start off with the best part, the performances. From the sibling villains of Trump's son Jake Lacy and cutthroat CEO Malene Akerman to the always lovable Dwayne Johnson, there are many performances that make these characters one worth following. The scene stealers are definitely Joe Manganiello's mercenary and Jeffrey Dean Morgan's Negan-esque government agent. Both are delightful and help round out this cast. In a film like this that follows a game about madness and mayhem, the action needs to be the focal point, and it definitely delivers. The monsters wreak havoc on the city of Chicago, making for a satisfying recreation of its source material. Surprisingly, it looks at the ramifications of the monster's destruction and the death toll that happens along with it, which I didn't expect from this film. And you gotta love the buddy dynamic between George and Dwayne Johnson's character Davis. I didn't expect it in this, but it's definitely the best part of this film as it helps humanize George as a character and create some of the best sequences in this story. However, while the majority of the cast does deliver, Naomie Harris feels like a placeholder if anything, and doesn't really fit into the story. This issue, among others, falls back onto the story, which just doesn't seem to work. The opening sequence feels like an entirely different story, both tonally and in its narrative, and that story is later told through heavy exposition, making that opening sequence pointless. The story is filled with every modern action trope imaginable, like the evil corporation, the smartass government agent, the ex-employee seeking revenge, the ex-special forces average Joe that can survive any disaster thrown their way, the slow-mo monster fights, and more. While some of these tropes are welcome in action adventures, others were unnecessary for Rampage, and yet they were still incorporated. It borrows from films like Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Kong Skull Island, The Mummy, and Transformers, and unfortunately, it doesn't improve on what it copies. This film at its bare bones is an action disaster, but it tries to tackle the very serious themes of poaching. Unfortunately, it only glosses over these for a few seconds and completely loses the message it's trying to give. What I thought would be the most redeeming aspect of this movie would be its CGI, but it comes across as mediocre at best. And the film tries to ground itself too much in realism, as it constantly repeats the science behind everything, thinking that that will make it better and that this will make it feel more real. And that's where I'll end our spoiler-free thoughts on this film. If you want to hear our final word or rating of this film, pause now and click the link in the description, because now it's time for spoilers. First off, I get that George is supposed to know sign language, and that's his way that he communicates with Davis, but there were a few scenes that were a bit confusing to me because he's signing to George, but then all of a sudden George will look away, and Davis is still talking to him both in sign language and in English, and yet George can still understand him, meaning that George can understand some English, but apparently fluently enough that he doesn't need to watch every sign that Davis is giving him, and therefore why is there a point in even talking in sign language if he can fluently understand English? I also love how they're trying to make this movie the most grounded scientific thing ever, and yet at the same time, Dwayne Johnson's character can outrun an enormous mutant crocodile, because that's logical. And the best scenes to me were the wolf hunt, the destruction of Chicago, any monster scene, and any buddy scene between Davis and George. So, with the thoughts heard, here's our final word. Rampage is an entertaining and action-packed disaster film that delivers on its source material by bringing mayhem and destruction. While the story is unoriginal, full of holes, and mindless at times, the action and charismatic performances elevate it to a fun monster movie. This film is manageable, and for what little source material it had, the story isn't half bad, so I'm gonna give Rampage a 5.5. Thanks everyone for watching our review. Are you planning on seeing Rampage, or if you've already seen it, do you have something to add? What did you think of the story? Let us know in the comments below. I'm Dylan Phillips, and this has been the Film Fanatic Review. If you like this video and you want to see more, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Check out our latest Worth the Watch video where we recap and review Season 2 of 13 Reasons Why. Don't forget to follow us on our social media. And until next time, Fanatics, keep it real.